My name is Nora Franklin. I thought I'd seen the worst life had to offer. I was wrong. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The house in Westchester County had been my prison for the past 2 years. A sprawling colonial that once belonged to my late husband's family, now inhabited by my eldest son Andrew and his wife Matilda. They moved in after Gerald passed away, claiming they wanted to support me during the transition. In reality, they needed free childcare for their twin boys and someone to maintain their lifestyle while they focused on climbing their corporate ladders. I should have recognized the red flags sooner, like how Matilda introduced me to her friends as Andrew's mother who lives with us, never once mentioning that the house was actually mine, left to me in Gerald's will. Or how Andrew would ask me to tidy up before his colleagues visited, as though I were the cleaning staff, not the woman who had taken out a second mortgage to fund his MBA. Or how they discussed household expenses right in front of me, debating whether to keep me on, like I was an employee nearing the end of her contract. And still, I stayed. God help me. I stayed. I stayed because I believed that family meant something, because I thought that love, even if it wasn't returned, had its own worth, because I was clinging to this hope that eventually my children would see all I had done for them and treat me with the respect I deserved. On the morning of Andrew's 32nd birthday, the sky was dull and overcast, just like my mood. I'd been up since 5 a.m., cooking for his party. Homemade lasagna, garlic bread, a chocolate cake baked from scratch. Matilda insisted on keeping things casual for Andrew's colleagues, but casual in their world meant I'd be stuck in the kitchen all day while she soaked up the credit. "Mom, don't forget, the house needs to look perfect," Andrew said, sipping coffee and barely looking up from his phone. "Mr. Harrison is coming. He's the senior partner I've been trying to impress. This could make or break my promotion." I swallowed the sting in my throat and smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. Everything will be ready." Matilda swept into the kitchen wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Nora, I put some cleaning supplies in the hall closet. The baseboards in the living room look dusty, and there are fingerprints on the French doors. Oh, and please make sure you're discreet tonight. Andrew's co-workers don't need to know about our living situation." Discreet, as though my presence in my own home was something to be hidden. I spent the morning cleaning already spotless rooms, cooking food I wouldn't even be invited to eat, and following Matilda's endless commands like I was her maid. Andrew had vanished into the office while I worked to transform the house into a flawless backdrop for his big night. By 6 p.m., everything sparkled. The crystal glasses shimmered under the chandelier Gerald had given me on our 20th anniversary. The dining room table, set with my grandmother's china, looked like something from a catalog. I'd driven 20 minutes to buy fresh flowers, with my own money, just to make sure the place smelled right. Guests started arriving around 7. I watched from the kitchen window as expensive cars lined the circular drive. Men in perfectly tailored suits, women wearing more jewelry than I'd owned in my entire life. These were Andrew's people now. The world he chose the day he decided his mother's working-class past was something to be ashamed of. I stayed in the kitchen, arranging appetizers and refilling wine glasses, which Matilda then took out to the guests as if she had prepared everything herself. Through the small pass-through window, I saw Andrew in the living room, laughing, charming everyone with stories about his latest courtroom wins. He looked so much like his father had at that age. Before life wore Gerald down, before the drinking, before the heart attack took him at 59. Nora Matilda's voice cut through my thoughts. "We need more of those little quiche things, and the wine's almost out," Matilda called sharply. I gave a quiet nod and went back to my duties, unseen, efficient, fading into the background. That had become my new identity. The silent engine behind the scenes, making sure everything ran smoothly while others took credit for the success. Around 9 p.m., as the noise in the house swelled, a man I didn't recognize stepped into the kitchen. He stood out, older than the rest, perhaps in his late 60s, with neatly combed silver hair and kind eyes behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. There was an understated authority in the way he moved, like someone used to being listened to. "Excuse me," he said with a warm, refined tone. "I'm looking for the restroom." "Down the hall, second door on the right," I replied, not lifting my eyes from the sink as I scrubbed another dish. But he didn't leave right away. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "this food is truly outstanding. Did Matilda prepare all of this herself?" His tone gave him away. There was a quiet suspicion behind his words, not judgmental, just knowing. I looked up for the first time. "No," I said softly. "I made it." He gave a slow nod. "That's what I thought." "She doesn't exactly seem like someone who spends time in the kitchen." He extended a hand. "Joseph Harrison." My hands paused in the soapy water. This was the Joseph Harrison. Andrew's boss, the senior partner, the man whose opinion could determine my son's future. And here I was, apron-clad and elbow-deep in dishes, like the hired help at my own house. I dried my hands quickly on a towel. "Nora Franklin," I said, "Andrew's mother." "Ah," he said, his expression turning more thoughtful. "Well, Mrs. Franklin, let me tell you, your cooking puts most restaurants to shame. Andrew is fortunate to have someone with your talents in the family." Before I could respond, Andrew's voice rang out from the living room. "Mr. Harrison, there you are. I was just telling everyone about the case we closed last month." Mr. Harrison gave me one last look before glancing toward the other room. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Franklin. I have a feeling this won't be our last conversation." And with that, he left, his words lingering in the air. I stood there, slightly stunned, unsure what he had meant, but too exhausted to think about it for long. The party gradually died down, but my work was far from over. By midnight, the last guest had finally gone. Matilda had disappeared upstairs hours earlier, claiming she was too tired to help. As usual, the full responsibility of restoring the house to its immaculate state had fallen to me. Andrew remained in the living room, loosening his tie, a fresh glass of whiskey in hand. "Good party," he said, not even glancing in my direction as I gathered empty glasses and stacked used plates. "I think Mr. Harrison was impressed." "That's nice," I replied, keeping my voice even. He took a long sip, then exhaled through his nose. "You know, Mom, Matilda and I have been talking about the future, about next steps." Something in his voice made me stop mid-motion. "What kind of next steps?" I asked. "Well, the boys are getting older. They'll be starting school soon. We probably won't need as much help around the house." Still not looking at me, he continued. "We've been thinking. Maybe it's time for you to find your own place. You know, get back out there. Live your life again." The words landed like a punch. I felt winded. After all I'd done, after everything I'd given up. They were trying to throw me away like I didn't matter. "This is my house, Andrew," I said quietly. He gave a casual shrug. "Actually, it's not. Dad left it to me in the will. You only have a life estate, which means you can live here, but you don't have to. We just think it would be better for everyone if you found somewhere more suitable. Something smaller, easier to manage, for someone your age." I looked at him then, really looked. And what I saw wasn't my son. It was a stranger wearing my son's face. Something inside me broke and reformed at that moment. The love I had held for him, the relentless hope that one day he would recognize my worth, all of it began to solidify into something else, something sharper, colder, unyielding. "I see," I said softly. He finally turned to meet my gaze, and for a brief second, I saw it, the flicker of doubt, the moment he realized he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but it was too late. The damage was done. And the woman who'd spent decades putting everyone else's needs before her own was finally irrevocably dead. The next morning brought no apologies, no acknowledgement of the previous night's conversation. Andrew left for work early, whistling as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Matilda stepped out of the bedroom in yoga pants, already on the phone, booking her daily massage and planning lunch with friends I'd never even met. "Nora, I'm meeting clients for brunch," she announced, not even looking up. "The boys need to be at soccer practice by 10:12. Don't forget Luke's inhaler. It's in the medicine cabinet." I nodded, watching her grab her car keys and designer handbag. No, please. No, thank you. No sign that she remembered I had spent the entire evening serving their guests in the house that was once mine. Once the door closed behind her, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring into the garden Gerald and I had planted 20 years ago. The anniversary roses he gave me were blooming again, deep red, like blood in the pale morning sun. Everything outside looked unchanged, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't a treasured mother cared for by grateful children. I was a convenience, free labor, quietly used and easily forgotten when my presence became inconvenient. The twins, bless their little hearts, were the only honest voices in the house. At just 8, they hadn't learned how to mask cruelty and politeness. "Grandma Nora, why don't you live in your own house?" Luke asked as I helped him with his soccer cleats. "This is my house, sweetheart," I told him gently. "But Daddy says it's his house now, and you just help take care of it 'cause you're old and don't have anywhere else to go." That one hurt, not because of Luke, but because I now knew what Andrew had been saying behind my back. In their innocent minds, I wasn't their grandmother who loved them. I was a charity case their parents had taken in out of pity. "Daddy says lots of things," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "Sometimes adults don't tell the whole truth." Later that day, as the boys napped and the house returned to its usual quiet, I made a decision. A firm one. I called my lawyer. "Nora, so nice to hear from you," said Patricia Young, the attorney who had handled Gerald's estate. "How are things with Andrew and Matilda?" "Well, that's why I'm calling," I said. "I need some clarity on Gerald's will. Andrew told me the house is his now." She hesitated for a moment. "Technically, he did inherit the property, but you have a life estate, Nora. That gives you full legal right to live there for the rest of your life. He can't kick you out. He suggested it'd be better for everyone if I found another place to live." Her voice sharpened. "That's his opinion, not his right. You still have legal control. That house is just as much yours, until the day you die. Don't let anyone pressure you otherwise." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Power. Andrew had lied. He'd tried to manipulate me into giving up my home. The soft, motherly part of me felt wounded, but the part that was waking up, the woman who had been buried under years of sacrifice, she felt something else. Cold, quiet satisfaction. If he wanted to play games, he was about to learn how they were really played, and the opportunity came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Matilda announced they were hosting another dinner party, this time for Andrew's birthday, which I'd somehow forgotten was approaching. The guest list would be smaller but more exclusive. Senior partners from his firm, Matilda's book club friends, and a few neighbors from the country club set. "We'll need the full treatment," Matilda said, scrolling through her phone as she gave me my orders. "Cocktail hour, seated dinner, and dessert. I'm thinking something elegant. You know, the kind of thing that shows we have sophisticated taste." "Of course," I said, already planning the next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I ordered the flowers, finalized the menu, and turned the house into something straight out of Architectural Digest. Naturally, Matilda took full credit, uploading curated shots to social media under the guise of party planning, which consisted mostly of her pointing at things I had already arranged and nodding like a creative genius. On the night of the event, I gave it everything I had. The table setting was immaculate. My grandmother's fine china, crystal glassware that danced in the candlelight, and silver polished to a mirror finish. The meal was ambitious. Beef Wellington, roasted vegetables with fresh herbs from my garden, and a delicate chocolate soufflé timed down to the second. Everything, every detail, was designed to impress Andrew's colleagues and support the image he had carefully constructed, a man with a flawless life. I wore my finest black dress, not high fashion like Matilda's labels, but elegant, timeless. I'd styled my hair and applied my makeup with care, wanting for once to look like what I truly was, the woman of the house, not the quiet worker behind the curtain. The guests began to arrive promptly at 7. Some were familiar, faces I remembered from the previous party, including Joseph Harrison, who offered me a knowing nod. Others were new, senior partners with their wives glittering in jewels and couture, the kind of people who saw wealth as a birthright, not something earned. I moved through the room with practiced grace, serving cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, refilling glasses while conversation floated around me like smoke. Stock market talk, vacation homes, grumbling about the costs of elite private schools. They lived in a world so insular, so wrapped in their own reflection, they didn't even notice me. "Andrew, you have to give me your caterer's name," Mrs. Wellington gushed, sipping champagne. "These hors d'oeuvres are divine." Andrew beamed, accepting the praise as if he had anything to do with them. "Oh, we have our secrets," he said with a playful wink in my direction, as though we were in on some charming family joke, as though I were complicit in his little lie. That was when Joseph Harrison approached me near the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Franklin," he said gently, "I have to ask, are you, by any chance, the same Nora Franklin who ran Franklin and Associates?" The question struck like a jolt of electricity. I hadn't heard that name, that version of myself, spoken aloud in over a decade. Franklin and Associates, the consulting firm I had built from scratch, the business that gave Gerald and me the means to buy this house, to send our kids to the best schools, to create the life Andrew now treated like an entitlement. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long," Harrison replied, a flicker of sharpness in his expression. 15 years, maybe? I remember when you sold to Brennan Corp. Brilliant move. If I recall, you walked away with what, 30 million? The number seemed to hang in the air. 32, I corrected gently. But who was counting? And it was true. Money I had invested wisely. Money that had grown even more since. Money Andrew knew absolutely nothing about, because after Gerald passed, I'd kept every financial detail private. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Harrison said, his tone low and curious. "But what are you doing serving drinks at your son's party?" Before I could answer, Andrew materialized beside us, his face slightly flushed, likely from wine and the glow of admiration he'd been soaking in all evening. "Mr. Harrison, I hope you're having a great time," he said cheerfully. "Isn't the food amazing?" "It certainly is," Harrison said evenly. "I was just speaking with Mrs. Franklin about her previous work." Andrew's smile stiffened. "Oh, that. Mom's little consulting thing. That was ages ago." $32 million isn't exactly ancient history, Harrison replied, calmly but firmly. The words hit like a thunderclap. Andrew's face drained of color, then flushed red, then pale again. All around us, the party carried on. Conversation, laughter, clinking glasses. But I could feel it. The dynamic had shifted. Something invisible but undeniable had tilted in the room. Power had just changed hands. "I'm sorry." "What?" Andrew finally stammered. Harrison glanced between us, his brows slightly raised as he pieced together what he had stumbled into. "Your mother built one of the most successful consulting firms in the region. When she sold it, she walked away with enough to retire comfortably for several lifetimes." Andrew turned to look at me, his face frozen between disbelief, confusion, and something disturbingly close to fear. For the first time in years, he wasn't seeing me as the aging woman who tidied his home and watched his children. He was seeing someone else entirely, a woman with leverage, with secrets, with power he had never bothered to imagine I might possess. "Mom," he muttered, barely audible. I looked at him, really looked, and felt nothing. No warmth, no pain, no lingering sadness, just cold, clear evaluation. In front of me stood a man who had spent years dismantling the foundation of our relationship, brick by brick, all in pursuit of status and control. And now, the illusion was breaking. "We'll talk later," I said evenly, then turned on my heel and walked back toward the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Harrison's voice, calm but firm, and just loud enough to carry. "Andrew, I think there might be some things about your family that you don't fully understand." Indeed, the night was taking a very sharp turn. I returned to the kitchen, my hands steady as I finished garnishing the beef Wellington. Through the serving window, I caught a glimpse of Andrew leaning in close to Harrison, speaking in hushed, hurried tones. Matilda was closing in, too, smiling politely, but with sharp, hunting eyes. She sensed something was off, and she was circling. The dining room was abuzz as the guests took their seats, most unaware of the subtle storm building beneath the tablecloth. I had arranged the seating with care, Harrison at Andrew's right, Matilda at the opposite end, where she could bask in her borrowed spotlight. I moved silently, serving each course with perfect precision. Back in the shadows again. But this time, I felt the shift, the glances, the murmurs, the pause in conversations as I approached and passed. Whispers were beginning to circulate. "Nora, dear," called Mrs. Wellington sweetly as I poured her wine. "Joseph was just sharing the most interesting story about a consulting firm. Didn't you used to work in that field?" There was syrup in her voice, the practiced, sugary tone wealthy women used when they were baiting someone for gossip they could later dissect over lunch at the club. "I did," I answered politely, offering no further details. "Oh, how interesting. What sort of consulting?" she probed, the smile never reaching her eyes. Before I could speak, Andrew cut across the table, his voice suddenly louder than necessary, a man trying to take back control. His cheeks were flushed, and his tone had that brittle sharpness men sometimes get when they sense their authority slipping. "Oh, Mom had this little business helping small companies with, operations. Filing systems, organizing offices, that kind of thing," he said with a casual shrug. "Nothing fancy. She's always been good at housework." The room went still. It was a brush-off, a condescending rewrite of my entire career, reduced to alphabetizing file drawers and tidying desks. I caught a few side eyes exchanged around the table. Harrison's jaw tightened, though he said nothing. All eyes turned to me. They were waiting. Wondering how I'd respond to being publicly diminished at my own table, I simply smiled and kept pouring the wine. "How nice that you remember," I said lightly. But Andrew, emboldened by wine and perhaps unsettled by Harrison's questions, wasn't done. Something had cracked in him, and he was trying desperately to plaster over it with control, to shove me back into the neat, silent role I'd outgrown. "Actually," he said, a little too loudly, "since we're all being honest tonight, I think it's only fair to clear up a few things about how things work in our home." I saw Matilda pale. She knew that tone. She knew he was about to say something catastrophically foolish. "Andrew," she said sharply under her breath, but he waved her off. No, it's fine. These are our friends." He swept his hand theatrically across the table. "The thing is, Mom doesn't really live here. Not in the typical sense. After Dad passed, we took her in because, well, she didn't really have anywhere else to go. It's more of a caregiving situation, really." The silence was instant and piercing. Forks stopped mid-air. Wine glasses hung frozen in hands. All conversation died. I could almost hear the mental calculations being done. Who was lying? Who had something to hide? What on earth was really happening in this picture-perfect home? Then Harrison cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Andrew, but I think there might be some confusion. No confusion at all, Andrew cut in, riding the high of imagined approval. Mom helps out around the house. She's actually pretty good at it. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. We let her stay because, well, what else was she going to do at her age? It works for everyone. Then, with a smug pause, he delivered the sentence that would seal his social and professional fate. Think of her as our housekeeper. We let her stay out of pity. She's good with a mop. The words dropped into the room like a thunderclap. Mrs. Wellington let out a gasp. 2 other wives stared in stunned silence. Several men shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable, the cruelty unmistakable, even when dressed in the language of practicality. But Andrew wasn't done. Buoyed by wine and his delusion of cleverness, he leaned toward Harrison with a conspiratorial grin. I mean, Mr. Harrison, you know how it is with aging parents. You've got to get creative with managing their expectations, right? Mom's got some colorful ideas about her past, but we've learned it's easier just to let her hold on to her little fantasies. Silence settled like fog. Thick. Oppressive. Devastating. Harrison set his wine glass down slowly, deliberately, his expression carefully controlled, but unmistakably cold. Andrew, he said in a low voice, are you absolutely certain that's how you want to describe your mother? Of course, Andrew said with a dismissive shrug. I mean, look at her. Does she look like someone who built a multi-million-dollar company? He let out a laugh, loud, harsh, uglier than any insult. Come on, Mr. Harrison, you, of all people, should be able to tell the difference between successful executives and domestic help. That was the moment everything shifted. Harrison's disgust gave way to something else entirely, something sharper, more decisive. His eyes moved from Andrew to me, still standing in the kitchen doorway with a serving spoon in my hand. And in that moment, I saw it. The recognition, not just of who I was, but of what I had endured, and what I might now be ready to do. Actually, Andrew, Harrison said, his voice calm but carrying across the room with authority that could silence a courtroom, I know exactly who your mother is. The real question is, do you? He turned to the stunned room, addressing the entire table now. Ladies and gentlemen, he said clearly, please allow me to introduce Nora Franklin, founder and former CEO of Franklin & Associates, one of the most successful management consulting firms in the northeastern United States. Mouths fell open, forks froze in midair, and then came the avalanche. When she sold her company 15 years ago, Harrison continued, the sale was valued at $32 million. Her firm employed over 200 professionals and serviced Fortune 500 companies and government contracts alike. Someone knocked over a wine glass, dark red liquid bleeding across the tablecloth like a wound. Mrs. Franklin, he went on, never breaking eye contact with Andrew, was a pioneer in supply chain optimization across multiple industries. She holds 2 patents for operational software still in use today, and still earning royalties. She has graced the covers of Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Inc. magazine. Andrew's skin had gone pale, then crimson, then sickly green. His mouth moved, but nothing came out, like a man drowning in the very lie he built. And perhaps most relevant to tonight's conversation, Harrison added, his voice now ringing with the weight of finality, Nora Franklin is currently worth an estimated $68 million, making her one of the wealthiest women in Westchester County. Wealthy enough, in fact, to purchase this law firm several times over, should she ever choose to do so. Matilda let out a choked gasp. All around the table, eyes turned to me. Shock. Admiration. calculated curiosity. The entire social order of the night had flipped in an instant. Then Harrison, still smiling politely but with deadly aim, turned back to Andrew. "So tell me, Andrew," he said smoothly, "would you like to revise your description of your mother as a housekeeper who stays here out of pity?" Andrew slowly looked at me, his eyes wide with realization, with shame, with fear. For the first time in years, he was seeing me clearly, not as the broken woman he'd convinced himself I was. But now he saw me for who I truly was. The force of nature I had always been. The woman who built an empire while he was still figuring out how to tie his shoes. The woman who could end his career, his marriage, his neatly curated life, with a single phone call. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking like an unsteady teenager. I was just... I slowly made my way around the table until I was standing directly behind his chair. The silence was absolute. I could hear the slow tick of the grandfather clock down the hall, the faint rustle of silk and wool as the guests leaned in, desperate not to miss a single word. "Just what, Andrew?" I asked, my voice low, calm, and lethal. "Just lying to your colleagues about who I am? Just telling your children their grandmother is a helpless charity case? Just trying to manipulate me into forfeiting my legal right to the home I built with your father?" His shoulders trembled. Tears began forming in his eyes, not tears of regret, but of fear. Fear of the truth being revealed. Fear of losing the very life he had stolen from me one lie at a time. Fear of the woman he had underestimated, and now couldn't control. "Please," he whispered, barely audible. "Please, don't do this. Not here. Not in front of them." I leaned down, my lips just inches from his ear, my voice soft, meant only for him. "You want to know what pity looks like, Andrew?" I whispered. "Pity is what I felt for you 5 minutes ago, when I still believed there might be something left of the son I raised. But pity has its limits, and you just reached mine." I straightened slowly, turned toward the room, and raised my voice. Not loud, but firm, steady, and full of unmistakable authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm afraid dinner is over." A ripple of motion spread across the room. Guests began gathering their coats and purses with the graceful haste of people trying to escape a social collapse. Harrison lingered by the doorway, catching my gaze with a nod, a silent salute of respect. When the last guest finally disappeared through the door, I turned toward Andrew and Matilda. They were still seated, pale and stunned, like defendants awaiting their verdict. "We need to talk," I said simply, and for the first time in 2 years, they listened. The house looked the same, but everything had changed. Same walls, same furniture, same lighting, but the power structure had shifted entirely. Andrew and Matilda remained at the dining table, silent and rattled. I moved around them calmly, extinguishing candles, gathering dishes, stacking china, my movements still precise, still composed. "Mom, please," Andrew finally said. His voice cracked open with desperation. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I said, not looking up as I collected crystal glasses. "Explain how you've been quietly stealing from me for 2 years while telling everyone I was your burden? Explain how you twisted your own children's perception of me? Or should we talk about your plan to steal my home by misrepresenting my rights under the will?" Matilda shifted in her chair, visibly shaken. Her dress wrinkled, makeup smudged, the image of polished perfection unraveling. "Nora, you have to understand our position," she began weakly. Andrew's career? I turned and met her eyes, and she recoiled like I'd slapped her. "Yes, let's discuss Andrew's career, the career that only exists because I paid for law school. The career made possible by the down payment I gifted on your first apartment, the country club membership I funded so he could network into his current job, the wedding I paid for. Shall I keep going?" That's what parents do," Andrew stammered. I wanted to help, I said, setting the plates down gently, every motion deliberate. That was past tense. But there's a difference between helping your child succeed and being exploited by him. I walked to the bar cart and poured myself a glass of Gerald's finest scotch, the very one Andrew had helped himself to countless times, never once asking permission. The irony tasted rich. Here's what's going to happen, I said, settling into the armchair that used to be Gerald's. Tomorrow morning, you're going to start looking for a new place to live. You have 30 days to find somewhere suitable and move out. You can't do that! Matilda jumped to her feet, her voice shrill, her composure gone. This is our home, the boys' school, our friends, everything is here. This was never your home. It's mine. One I generously allowed you to stay in, under the illusion that you were supporting me through grief. That arrangement is now over. Andrew's face collapsed in on itself. Mom, please, if you kick us out, how will it look? My reputation, my standing at the firm. Your reputation? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the room like shattered glass. Andrew, by tomorrow morning, everyone at your firm will know exactly what happened here tonight. Harrison won't keep this to himself. Men like him don't stay quiet after witnessing something this revealing. The truth hit him like a physical punch. He had sacrificed our relationship to build his image, and now the image had crumbled. The humiliation he'd so carefully prepared for me had detonated beneath him. There has to be something we can do, Matilda said, her voice cracking with desperation. Some way to fix this. Fix this? I echoed, slowly and deliberately, as if the words themselves were foreign. Matilda, what exactly do you think needs fixing? That you've been living off my wealth while treating me like your housemaid? That your husband degraded his own mother to impress his boss? Or the fact that you've been planning to steal my home for 2 years? She had no response. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, my voice soft but deadly. I don't forgive. I don't forget. And I don't give second chances to people who confuse my kindness with weakness. For the next hour, I laid out the new reality with the same calm, strategic precision I once used to restructure failing companies. They would move out within 30 days. Andrew would resign before Harrison had the chance to fire him, because that outcome was inevitable. There would be no financial support from me, no help, no references, no soft landings. But the boys, Andrew pleaded. They're your grandchildren. You can't punish them for what we did. The boys you taught to think of me as a burden? I asked. The boys you told I was just a sad old woman who was lucky to be taken in by you? I shook my head. No, Andrew. You decided what kind of relationship they'd have with me, and now you get to live with the outcome of that decision. Matilda tried a different tactic. Nora, you're upset, and you have every right to be, but think about your family's legacy. Think about Gerald. He wouldn't have wanted— Don't. The word cracked like a whip across the room. Don't you dare invoke my husband's name. Gerald would be ashamed of what his son has become. He'd be horrified by the way you've both treated the woman he loved. I stood up, smoothing my dress with the same careful grace I'd shown throughout the evening. This conversation is over. You have 30 days. Use them wisely. I turned and began walking toward the stairs. Mom! Andrew called out one last time, his voice hoarse with panic. What if we apologize? What if we try to make this right somehow? I paused at the base of the staircase and slowly turned to look at him. This man, once my baby, the first child I carried, the son I dreamed about while Gerald and I planned our life together, the boy I had poured love into, sacrificed for, supported, protected, forgiven. Now I felt nothing, not grief, not rage, not even sorrow, just cold, clear logic, a clean assessment of a problem to be solved. Andrew, I said quietly, there are some things that can't be undone, some words that can't be taken back, some betrayals that are simply too complete to forgive. and I turned and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My bedroom, in my house, bought with my money. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in 2 years, I locked it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Patricia Chen, my attorney. The second to my financial advisor, and the third to a private investigator I had occasionally used during my consulting career. By the time Andrew and Matilda came downstairs, still stunned and hollow from the night before, I was seated at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and a stack of legal documents in front of me. "What's all this?" Matilda asked wearily. "Insurance," I replied. "Andrew, I've had Patricia research your employment contract. Apparently, there's a morality clause about behavior that reflects poorly on the firm. Fascinating reading." Andrew turned a shade paler. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said, sipping my coffee. "And I also had a very productive chat with my investigator about your spending habits. Did you know it's possible to track every dollar you've spent in the last 2 years?" I leaned forward slightly. "Every dinner charged to the credit cards I co-signed. Every vacation paid for with the monthly allowance I gave you. Every designer dress listed as a household expense." Matilda's face drained of color. That's not legal," she stammered. "You gave us access to those accounts." "Yes," I replied coolly. "Access for household needs and true emergencies, not for spa days and luxury lifestyles you couldn't sustain on your own salaries." I sipped again. Fraud is such an unpleasant word, but sometimes accurate. "You're bluffing," Andrew said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Without a word, I slid a folder across the table. Inside, printed bank records, credit card statements, itemized receipts, over $23,000 in just the past 6 months alone. Spa treatments, golf club memberships, luxury boutiques, all neatly logged, all traceable, all legally questionable. They stared at the folder as if it might bite them. "Here's what's going to happen," I said in my most clinical boardroom tone. "You're going to vacate this house quietly. No drama, no leaks to the media, no rumors spread to neighbors, and you will not, under any circumstances, try to use my grandchildren to manipulate me." I leaned back in my chair. "In return, I won't press charges for fraud. I won't send this file to the Bar Association's Ethics Board." Matilda swallowed hard. "And if we don't agree?" I smiled, a smile as cold and sharp as glass. "Then you'll find out just how devastating a woman like me can be when she's no longer willing to protect you." Andrew looked from me to Matilda, then back again. You've really planned all of this?" "I've had 2 years to think about it," I said softly. 2 years of being dismissed, used, and deceived under my own roof. Did you truly think I wouldn't notice? Did you really believe I was the frail, clueless woman you pretended I was?" He had no reply. Neither of them did. 29 days, I said, calmly collecting the folder. "I suggest you start packing." As I left the kitchen, I heard Matilda begin to cry. Soft, broken sobs that might have pierced my heart once. Back when I believed in the sanctity of family. Back when I thought love could overcome betrayal. But that version of me was long gone. The woman standing now felt only a quiet sense of justice. 3 weeks later, I stood at the front window, watching the moving truck roll away from the circular drive. No scenes, no drama, no final pleas for forgiveness. Andrew and Matilda's exit had been clean and silent, just like I instructed. No emotional farewells with the grandchildren they had turned against me. No apologies. No closure. Just boxes, furniture, and the vacuum left behind when power changes hands. The boys cried, "Of course." 8-year-olds don't understand betrayal. They only knew that Grandma Nora didn't want them around anymore. Andrew tried to weaponize their tears. One last desperate play. "You're punishing innocent children," he had said. But I felt nothing. No guilt. No remorse. Only a hard-earned satisfaction that Andrew was now tasting the consequences of his own actions. The house felt different. Lighter. The bitterness, the quiet resentment, the daily indignities, all gone. Only stillness remained. I walked through each room like a woman reclaiming her kingdom. Spaces that had once been mine, taken, dismissed, devalued, were mine again. In Andrew's old office, I found a forgotten stack of papers, medical bills, insurance notices, financial records, the scraps of a life spent beyond his means. At the bottom of the pile was a letter from his law firm dated 3 days ago. I opened it without hesitation. Privacy was a courtesy I no longer extended to people who had violated mine so completely. Dear Mr. Franklin, it began. Following recent events and their impact on firm morale and client confidence, we regret to inform you that your position with Harrison Wells and Associates has been terminated effective immediately. Perfect. Harrison had acted even faster than I anticipated. Just as the letter curled and blackened in the fireplace, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered. Mrs. Franklin? This is Janet Sullivan from Channel 7 News. We've heard some interesting rumors about a dinner party incident involving Andrew Franklin, and we'd love to get your side of the story. I smiled into the phone. I'm sorry, but I don't give interviews. However, you might want to speak with Joseph Harrison from Harrison Wells and Associates. I believe he has some very interesting perspectives on professional ethics and family values. After ending the call, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into Gerald's favorite chair. The local news would run with it. They always did when it involved the public implosion of wealthy families. By tomorrow, everyone in Westchester County would know exactly what kind of man Andrew Franklin really was. And the irony was delicious. He had obsessed over image, reputation, perception. Now his name would be a punchline, synonymous with cruelty, arrogance, and spectacular failure. The very people he tried to impress would now whisper behind his back, or worse, pretend not to see him. In the days that followed, I received confirmation that everything was falling perfectly into place. Patricia Chen called to say Andrew had tried to contest the eviction, only to drop the case after reviewing the evidence of their financial misconduct. My financial advisor informed me of several failed attempts to access funds, accounts I had quietly shut down the morning after the dinner party. But it was the private investigator who gave the most satisfying update. They've moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Mount Vernon, he reported. Public school district, no doorman, street parking only. Mrs. Franklin is working part-time at a boutique downtown. Mr. Franklin is still unemployed. Word's gotten out about what happened at the dinner party. He's been blacklisted. The kids have enrolled at the local elementary school. From what I can tell, they're struggling to adjust. I felt something flicker. Pity, perhaps. Then I crushed it. Those children were learning life lessons their parents had failed to teach them. Thank you for the update, I said. I won't be needing your services anymore. A month after they moved out, Matilda called. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Nora, please, she began immediately, her voice shaking with tears. The boys are asking about you. They don't understand why Grandma doesn't want to see them anymore. Luke's having nightmares. Levi's grades are dropping. They think they did something wrong. They did do something wrong, I said, cool and measured. They learned to treat me as less than human. They learned that disrespect comes without consequence. Now they're learning that it doesn't. They're children, she pleaded. They don't deserve this. No, they don't, I said. But they got it anyway, because you and Andrew made choices that led to consequences. This is what consequences look like, Matilda. She broke into sobs on the other end of the line. Andrew's been trying to find work, but everyone knows what happened. No firm will take him. We're barely making rent. The boys had to leave behind all their friends, and now they blame themselves. Andrew should have thought about that before he called me a charity case in front of his boss. You should have thought about that before you spent 2 years treating me like hired help. Please, Nora, Matilda begged. If not for us, then for the boys. They're innocent in all of this. I considered that, briefly. Innocence, I said, is a luxury, Matilda, and your boys are learning early what it costs to lose it. Consider it a gift. Then I hung up, her sobs still in my ear, and blocked their number without hesitation. 6 months later, I ran into Mrs. Wellington at the grocery store. She approached me with the delicate respect that wealthy people reserve for those who've proven themselves far more powerful than anticipated. Nora, so lovely to see you, she said with a tight smile. I've been meaning to call. We're organizing a charity luncheon for the Children's Hospital and would be honored if you'd consider joining our committee. The same woman who once laughed politely at Andrew's backhanded jokes, now hoping to align herself with my restored name, my untouchable status. The same socialites who had witnessed my attempted humiliation now scrambled to be in my good graces. How thoughtful, I said with a small smile. I'll have my assistant send a check. Unfortunately, I'm far too busy for committee meetings. I didn't have an assistant, of course, but she didn't need to know that. Letting her believe I had staff to handle trivial social functions only enhanced the mystery. The power. Driving home through the shaded, tree-lined streets of my exclusive neighborhood, I reflected on the satisfying completeness of it all. Andrew and Matilda had lost everything. Their home, their status, their financial comfort, even their children's admiration. They were learning the harsh truth. Love without stability is no comfort at all. A hungry, shivering thing. Meanwhile, I had regained everything I had been stripped of, and more. My home was mine again. My name, respected. My dignity, untouchable. And my reputation as someone not to be crossed, permanently established. Calls from old business contacts resumed. Invitations to galas and exclusive events filled my mailbox. People who had once conveniently forgotten Nora Franklin were suddenly eager to remember her, now that she had proven she could buy and sell them without blinking. I pulled into my circular driveway and parked, pausing to take in the house Gerald and I had chosen together 30 years ago. The roses were in bloom again, deep red, like drops of blood in the softening light. Beautiful, dangerous, just like justice, served cold. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and raised it silently to the portrait of Gerald above the fireplace. They learned, my love, I said. They finally learned what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The house was quiet, not the bitter silence of being ignored, used, or dismissed, but the peaceful quiet of a space that belonged entirely to me. No entitled children demanding forgiveness, no grandchildren taught to see me as less than, no daughter-in-law scheming to claim what wasn't hers. Just me, my victory, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that the universe does, in rare and perfect moments, deliver justice. Some might call what I did cruel. They might say family deserves grace. That love should conquer pride, that a grandmother should always put her grandchildren's needs above her own dignity. But those people have never been called a charity case by their own child. They've never watched their life's work mocked as filing and organization. They've never seen their own grandchildren trained to view them as a maid, not a matriarch. They've never learned the cold, clear truth. Some betrayals are too complete for redemption. I've learned that truth, and I am better for it, stronger, freer, myself again. And if Andrew, Matilda, and their sons have finally learned that actions have consequences, that respect must be earned, that cruelty carries a price they can no longer afford, then perhaps, in the end, something good came of it all, not forgiveness, not healing, not redemption, just justice. Perfect, inevitable, satisfying, the way it should be. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from.